Imagine you were standing on the pitch in front of, like, 80,000 screaming fans,
Oh, the pressure is just unimaginable.
right? You have the ball at your feet, you look up, the field seems wide open, your teammates are moving into space, and for a split second you think you're safe.
You think you're orchestrating this great attack.
Exactly. But you don't realize you have just walked directly into a tactical trap that was designed, 6 months ago in a boardroom somewhere. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
It's great to be here.
So today, our mission is to completely deconstruct this historic opening match of the FIFA World Cup 2026, the Mexico versus South Africa game.
Yeah, what a match.
It really was. And we have this incredibly extensive, highly granular piece of source material in front of us today. It's titled Mexico versus South Africa, the 2026 World Cup Opener Analysis.
And, I mean, it is detailed.
Super detailed. So
Yeah.
our goal today is not to just give you a generic sports recap, right?
Yeah.
We are not here to talk about the final scoreline or, the passion of the crowd.
But there are plenty of places you can go for that.
Exactly. We are going to forensically examine the exact, ruthlessly mechanical reasons why Mexico just completely dominated this match, like how they turned a high-stakes opener into an absolute footballing masterclass.
And to really understand that dominance, we kind of have to throw away the conventional wisdom. The
Yeah.
idea that teams win simply because they run harder or want it more.
Right, the whole passion and grit narrative.
Well, yeah, exactly. The analysis we are working from makes it abundantly clear that Mexico's victory was, well, it was a triumph of spatial geometry and psychological manipulation, really.
That sounds intense.
It is. And the entire blueprint becomes visible the very second we look at how Mexico reacted when South Africa tried to build their attacks up from the back. That initial trigger point dictates, literally everything that followed.
Okay, let's unpack this trigger point because the source document specifically focuses on Mexico's pressing strategy here. But it makes a really vital distinction.
Yeah, they weren't just running around blindly.
Right. They weren't executing a standard high press like sprinting all the way up to the South African goalkeeper. They utilized this very targeted middle third press.
Which is so crucial to understand.
So help me visualize the architecture of that. Why focus specifically on the middle of the pitch instead of just, choking them out right at their own goal line?
Well, a high press where you attack the defenders inside their own penalty area, it's aggressive, yeah, but it also provides a very simple out for the defense, which is panic.
Just boot it away.
Exactly. If a defender is swarmed right in front of his own goal, his immediate instinct is to just kick the ball as far down the field as possible.
Right. It's a low percentage pass, but at least it clears the danger.
Yeah.
The defense gets to reset.
Spot on. But the middle third press, however, is way more insidious.
Yep.
By backing off the initial buildup, Mexico gave the South African center backs this false sense of security.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they allowed them to complete those first 2 or 3 short passes out of the back.
So you actively invite them to move up the pitch. You're letting them spread out their formation.
Right, the fullbacks push up the touch lines, the midfielders turn their bodies to face the opponent's goal.
Everyone transitions mentally from we are defending to we are attacking.
And that transition right there is the vulnerability. Think about the biomechanics and the cognitive load required in that exact moment.
Okay, paint a picture for me.
A South African midfielder receives the ball near the halfway line. His brain has already mapped the field for an attack. His weight is shifting forward. His teammates are accelerating into these advanced spaces, totally leaving their defensive posts.
Right, they're committing to the play.
Exactly. And at that precise fraction of a second, when South Africa is structurally at their most expansive and exposed, Mexico just snaps the trap shut.
Man, it sounds a lot like a half-court trap in basketball.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
You let the point guard cross the half-court line so they feel like they've escaped the backcourt pressure. And the second they cross that threshold, bam, 2 defenders immediately swarm them.
Right, right.
The passing lanes that looked open a second ago are suddenly gone, and the player is physically trapped between the defenders and the sideline.
The spatial dynamics are almost identical. When Mexico initiates that press in the middle third, the South African ball carrier is suddenly suffocated.
But I'd imagine it's almost worse than the basketball trap.
Oh, much worse. Because in football, the field is so huge that reversing direction takes massive physical effort. If South Africa loses the ball in that middle third, their entire defensive shape is completely broken.
Their players are literally running the wrong way.
Exactly. Mexico wins the ball back with their most dangerous attacking players already facing the South African goal like 30 or 40 yards closer than if they had started from their own half.
Okay, I see the offensive benefit there, absolutely. But I'm struggling to understand how a manager actually sanctions this strategy, because the risk profile seems absolutely insane to me.
It definitely requires nerves of steel.
Right. I mean, if you are committing 4 or 5 Mexican midfielders to suddenly sprint at the ball carrier in the middle of the pitch, you are entirely vacating the center of the park.
You are.
So if a South African player manages to slip just one progressive pass through that initial wave of pressure, aren't they suddenly staring down a completely unprotected backline? It feels like playing Russian roulette with your defense.
Well, it would be Russian roulette if the press were uncoordinated, which is why the source material really emphasizes the structural discipline of Mexico's execution here.
Okay, so how do they mitigate that risk?
A press only works as a cohesive unit. If one Mexican player sprints at the ball, he's easily bypassed. The South African midfielder just sidesteps him.
Makes sense.
But Mexico didn't press with one player. They pressed with a coordinated net. They rely on what we call shadow marking.
Shadow marking. Okay, what is that?
So the player attacking the ball carrier isn't just trying to win the tackle. He is intentionally curving his run to block the passing lane to the most dangerous South African attacker behind him.
Oh, so he's using his own shadow to cover a guy.
Exactly. And simultaneously, the other Mexican midfielders are stepping up to smother the immediate short passing options.
So the ball carrier doesn't just see a defender closing down on him. He sees a defender closing down while simultaneously cutting off the very teammate he was planning to pass to.
Right.
The cognitive overload there must be massive.
It creates total paralysis. The South African player needs maybe a full second to process the new visual information and find a secondary pass, but the Mexican press arrives in half a second.
The window closes before the brain can even register it.
And that is exactly what we saw in this match. South Africa simply could not process the spatial changes fast enough, which led to immediate turnovers in the absolute most dangerous zone on the pitch.
That makes perfect sense for how Mexico dictated the geography of the match. But getting the ball back is only half the battle, right?
Right, you have to do something with it.
Exactly. And the source document makes it clear that what truly dismantled South Africa was what Mexico did immediately after the turnover.
Yes, the wide play.
Yeah, we need to talk about the flanks, because the analysis points to Mexico's fluidity and their ability to create overloads on the wings as the primary engine of their attack.
The transition from the middle third trap into the wide overload is just seamless, and it relies really heavily on the fullbacks.
Okay, break that down.
Well, traditional football often isolates the wingers, leaving them one-on-one against a defender. But the modern game, and specifically Mexico's execution here, it treats the flank as a mathematical battleground.
A mathematical battleground. I love that phrasing.
An overload is simply a deliberate numerical superiority in a specific spatial zone.
Okay, let's do the math on the pitch for the listener. If South Africa is defending the left side of their penalty area, they typically have their left back and maybe a left-sided midfielder covering that space, right?
Correct. Two players.
Two players. So in a static, traditional formation, Mexico might attack that space with their right winger and their right fullback.
Exactly, a two-on-two scenario. The defense is comfortable there. They understand their assignments. The winger marks the fullback. The fullback marks the winger.
Simple enough.
But Mexico introduces a third variable, usually a central midfielder drifting wide or the striker dropping deep into that channel. Suddenly, Mexico has three attackers operating in a space defended by only two South Africans.
And the moment you introduce that third attacker, the defensive assignments completely disintegrate. It's a cascading failure.
Completely.
Because if the South African center back steps out of the middle to go deal with that third man on the wing, he has just vacated the most critical area of the pitch, the space directly in front of the goal.
That is the gravitational pull of the overload. You are forcing the defense to make an impossible choice.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Precisely. Do you stay compact in the middle and let Mexico freely combine on the wings to whip in dangerous crosses, or do you pull defenders out to extinguish the fire on the flank, thereby stretching your defensive line and creating massive gaps in the center?
It sounds like a geometric paradox for the defense. I was initially thinking about this like a high-speed shell game where the defenders are just losing track of the ball.
That's a common misconception, yeah.
But it's actually more insidious than that.
Yeah.
The defenders know exactly where the ball is, and they know exactly where the attackers are. They just physically don't have enough bodies to cover all the passing angles.
Right. They are mathematically defeated before the pass is even made.
That is a crucial distinction. It's not trickery. It's structural dominance.
And Mexico exacerbated this mathematical disadvantage through constant fluid rotation. The player operating as the winger 1 minute might drift centrally, while the central midfielder overlaps him on the outside.
Just constant movement.
Yeah. The source document notes that this fluidity completely overwhelmed South Africa because it absolutely destroys man-marking systems.
Right, because if you are a South African defender instructed to mark the Mexican winger, what do you do when that winger suddenly sprints directly into the center circle?
You're stuck.
Yeah. If you follow him, you leave a giant hole in the wing. If you let him go, he's suddenly unmarked in the midfield.
You hesitate. And in elite football, a half second of hesitation is fatal. So the defense begins to shrink.
They just pull back.
To survive the constant threat of being outnumbered on the wings, South Africa's natural subconscious reaction was to pack players tighter and tighter together in the middle, effectively retreating into a very dense defensive shell just to put bodies in the way.
They collapse their perimeter to protect the core, which is a common survival tactic, sure, but it creates a totally different tactical puzzle for Mexico.
Exactly, because you can't just run through a wall of 8 defenders packed into the penalty area.
You need absolute surgical precision to pick the lock. And this is where the source material brings in Santiago Jimenez and the progressive pass that finally broke the deadlock.
Right. What's fascinating here is that breaking down a dense defensive structure requires penetrating through what we call the lines of the opposition.
The lines.
Yeah. When a team retreats, they form horizontal bands of players, a line of defenders, a line of midfielders closely in front of them. The goal of a progressive pass is to thread the ball through those bands.
Eliminating multiple defenders from the play with a single strike of the ball.
Exactly.
Visualize that for me. If South Africa has 4 defenders and 4 midfielders sitting really deep, passing the ball sideways in a U shape around that block doesn't actually accomplish anything, right?
No, sideways possession is completely sterile.
You're maintaining possession, but you aren't disrupting the structure at all.
A progressive pass is a vertical or diagonal laser that dissects the block. But, and this is key, the pass itself is only half the equation.
Okay, what's the other half?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the source material goes to great lengths to highlight that the brilliance of the opening goal wasn't just the execution of the pass, it was Santiago Giménez's movement off the ball that made the pass physically possible.
This is where the forensic level of this analysis gets really fascinating. How does a striker's movement actually open up a passing lane through a packed defense? I mean, the defense is literally staring right at the ball carrier.
We have to talk about peripheral vision and the biomechanics of a center back.
Okay, I'm with you.
A defender's primary responsibility is the ball, obviously, but they must also track the most dangerous attacker. When Jimenez operates as what they call a fox in the box, he leverages a concept called blindside running.
Blindside running.
Yes. He positions himself not in front of the center backs where they can see him and the ball simultaneously, but directly on their shoulder or slightly behind them.
The geometric blind spot.
Precisely. The center back has to make a physical choice, wash the Mexican midfielder preparing to pass, or turn his head completely to check where Giménez is.
He cannot do both.
Right. So Giménez waits for the exact millisecond. The defender turns his head to look at the ball carrier. In that fraction of a second, Giménez changes his trajectory, darting across the defender's blind side into a pocket of space between the center back and the fullback.
Oh, man. By the time the defender turns his head back, the striker has literally vanished from his previous position.
He is a step behind reality.
The defender is processing outdated information.
Exactly. Giménez's movement effectively scrambled the South African defensive radar. The progressive pass arrives in the space Giménez just opened up, and the center backs are entirely destabilized.
They are reacting to a threat that has already passed them.
Giménez receives the ball and finishes clinically. It is a masterpiece of spatial manipulation.
But beyond the scoreboard, the analysis notes that this opening goal fundamentally ruptured the entire game state.
Oh, completely.
Up until that moment, South Africa was relying on a low block, sitting deep, absorbing the pressure, and hoping to survive.
The low block is entirely predicated on a 0-0 scoreline. It is a test of patience. The psychological compact of a low block is, we will suffer without the ball, we will endure exhaustion because as long as they don't score, we are in the game.
Makes sense.
But the second the ball hits the back of the net, that compact shatters. You cannot sit in a low block when you are losing. You are just slowly bleeding to death.
Because sitting deep generates zero offensive threat. So South Africa is suddenly forced into this excruciating tactical pivot. They have to push their defensive line higher up the pitch.
They have to start committing midfielders forward to chase the equalizer.
And that is exactly what Mexico wanted.
Yeah.
By forcing South Africa to abandon the safety of their low block, Mexico opened up the pitch. The spaces between the South African players increased. The tight, dense wall became porous.
Yes.
And this leads us directly into how Mexico weaponized possession to trigger a total psychological and physical collapse. The source refers to Mexico's midfield operating as a metronome.
Right. And the concept of the midfield metronome usually conjures up an image of a play just calmly distributing the ball, keeping things ticking over.
Yeah, nice and relaxed.
But the way this analysis describes it, tempo control wasn't just about maintaining rhythm. It was a form of active, aggressive torture against the South African players.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want to zero in on the psychology of that tempo control. As a listener, you've probably felt that frustration in a casual game of keep away in the backyard.
Oh, for sure.
But at an elite level, how much of this retaining possession is actually an offensive tactic versus just psychological warfare?
Well, we need to look at the physiological toll of chasing a game against a team that excels at possession. When South Africa was forced to press higher to get the ball back, Mexico didn't just relentlessly attack. They began to manipulate the tempo.
Slowing it down.
Exactly. They would string together 20 or 30 passes in their own half, moving the ball horizontally.
I want to dig into the biology of this for a second. Because if I'm a South African midfielder, I am now sprinting 20 yards to close down the Mexican center back.
Right.
Just before I get there, he passes it to the fullback. I have to change direction and sprint another 20 yards to close down the fullback. He passes it to the central midfielder.
You're doing shuttles.
I am constantly accelerating, decelerating, and changing direction, but I am never actually touching the ball.
And the physiological cost of that is staggering. You are rapidly depleting your anaerobic energy stores. Lactic acid is building up in your muscles. Your lungs are burning.
Sounds miserable.
But, more importantly, we have to consider the neurological impact. The brain requires immense amounts of oxygen to process complex spatial information and make split-second tactical decisions.
Okay, so when you're gasping for air,
When your body is starved of oxygen because you are constantly engaged in fruitless sprints, your cognitive function degrades.
you start making decisions based on desperation rather than structure. You just want the ball to stop moving so you can catch your breath.
You lunge into tackles a fraction of a second too late. You stop tracking the subtle runs of the opposition because scanning the field takes too much mental energy.
That's fascinating.
The analysis explicitly points out this resulting defensive naivety. South Africa began turning the ball over cheaply in their own half. They started failing to track late runs from the Mexican midfielders into the penalty area.
So these weren't necessarily failures of skill.
No, not at all. They were failures of a neurologically exhausted team.
And Mexico recognized this. They are monitoring the physical degradation of their opponent in real time. They are intentionally slowing the game down to invite that exhausting pressure.
Yep.
And then the exact moment they sense the fatigue peaking, they suddenly inject massive pace into the attack.
The contrast is devastating. You lull an exhausted opponent into a slow, rhythmic trance of chasing shadows, and then you suddenly play a high-speed vertical pass.
The physical shock to the South African defenders is immense.
They simply don't have the fast-twitch muscle response left to pivot and sprint backward at full speed. It becomes a vicious cycle. The physical exhaustion breeds tactical mistakes, and the tactical mistakes force them to run even more to recover.
Which eventually creates a boiling point.
Yeah.
You have players who are physically depleted, structurally confused, and completely starved of the ball. The frustration morphs into anger.
It does.
And the source document pinpoints this exact emotional cocktail as the catalyst for the defining disaster of the match for South Africa.
The straight red card.
Yeah.
The analysis describes the challenge as reckless and high intensity, born entirely out of frustration. This was not a tactical foul to stop a breakaway. This was a player just lashing out.
Total meltdown.
It represents the total collapse of discipline, which is the inevitable endpoint of the psychological warfare Mexico was waging with their tempo control.
Let's break down the geometric nightmare of a red card at the elite level. It's not just a matter of we have to work 10% harder. The entire spatial equation of the pitch fundamentally changes.
Right.
How does a manager even begin to reorganize a team of 10 men against a side that has spent the last 70 minutes mathematically tearing you apart with wide overloads?
Honestly, it is a problem without a solution. A standard football pitch is roughly 70 yards wide. To defend that width effectively, you need a certain number of bodies spaced at specific intervals so that no single passing lane is too large.
Right.
When you lose a player, you lose horizontal coverage. The manager has to make a devastating compromise.
So what does this all mean? If you're down to 10 men, why not just park the bus completely? Put everyone in the penalty box and just survive. My immediate instinct is survival. Let's protect the center of the pitch. If we force our remaining 9 outfield players to stay extremely compact, guarding the penalty area, we can at least deny them a clear shot on goal, right?
Well, if you narrow your formation to protect the center, you are essentially forfeiting the wings. You are telling Mexico, we will not contest the outer 15 yards of the pitch on either side.
But Mexico's entire game plan was already built on dominating those exact wide areas.
Yeah.
You were actively handing them the exact space they want.
Exactly. Which means Mexico's fullbacks and wingers can push even higher, completely uncontested. They have infinite time to pick out crosses or perfectly angled cutbacks.
Love lose-lose.
But let's look at the alternative. Suppose the South African manager decides to stretch his 10 men across the full width of the pitch to contest those flanks and stop the crosses.
Then the distance between each South African defender increases. The gaps in the defensive line grow wider.
You create massive, gaping corridors right down the middle of the pitch. Corridors that a striker like Santiago Giménez or a progressive passing midfielder will exploit instantly.
Wow.
You cannot stretch 10 men to do the job of 11 without compromising the structural integrity of the net. Against a team that operates with the speed and precision of Mexico, leaving those gaps is suicidal.
So the structure is entirely fractured. The dam hasn't just cracked, it is completely burst. And Mexico didn't just passively let the clock run out against 10 men. They actively sought to execute the final blow, what the source document calls the insurance policy. And the architect of that final blow was Irving Chucky Lozano.
Oh, what a player. The analysis identifies Lozano as the electric winger, and his goal is the perfect case study of how you ruthlessly punish a structural collapse.
Break it down for us.
When South Africa went down to 10 men, their defensive line became ragged. In a desperate attempt to cover the expanding spaces, defenders began stepping out of position.
I'm trying to picture Lozano's positioning during this chaos. He's out on the wing. I keep thinking of him like a coiled spring or maybe a pressure valve in a complex plumbing system.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, like Mexico has been pumping water into this system for 70 minutes, building up the pressure through those wide overloads and the tempo control. South Africa's defense is the pipe trying to contain it. The red card is a massive crack in the pipe. Lozano isn't forcing his way in. He's just waiting on the perimeter for the unequal spatial pressure to inevitably blow the seal, and he simply flows into the resulting vacuum at terrifying speed.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the physics of the counterattack. Lozano didn't just make a blind run. He recognized that the South African fullback, who was previously tasked with marking him, was now being pulled centrally to help cover the gaps left by the missing player.
Ah, so the fullback abandons him.
Exactly. Lozano stayed wide, isolating himself in an ocean of space. The moment Mexico regained possession, they exploited that newly formed vacuum.
They spray the ball out wide to him.
And this is where his individual brilliance executes the tactical blueprint. A lesser winger might just run straight down the touchline and try to cross the ball into a crowded box. But Lozano uses his explosive pace to cut inside, driving directly into the seams of the fractured, exhausted South African defense.
The defenders are too physically depleted to match his acceleration. The angle of his run forces the center backs to make another impossible choice. Step up and confront him, risking a pass slipping behind them, or back off and allow him a clear line of sight to the goal.
They backed off just enough, and he unleashed a strike that was mathematically impossible for the goalkeeper to stop. It was clinical.
Incredible.
But what the source material really underscores is that this goal was not an isolated moment of magic. It was the absolute proof of concept for Mexico's entire philosophy.
It was the culmination of a 70-minute process. The middle third trap forced the initial turnovers. The wide overloads exhausted the defense. The tempo control triggered the neurological breakdown and the red card.
Step by step.
The resulting geometric nightmare created the vacuum, and Lozano was the pressure valve that finalized the destruction. Every single piece of the tactical domino effect functioned perfectly.
It is rare to see a tactical blueprint executed with such relentless fidelity on such a massive stage. Mexico didn't just defeat South Africa, they dismantled them sequentially.
So we have an incredible opening night, a clinic in spatial manipulation for Mexico and a brutal reality check for South Africa. But, you know, a World Cup is a war of attrition.
It really is.
It is a grueling month-long marathon. A masterclass in Game 1 is meaningless if your legs fall off by Game 3. Based on the analysis of this match, what does the trajectory look like for these two nations going forward? Let's start with Mexico.
Well, the source document is highly bullish on Mexico's prospects. Securing 3 points and a very healthy positive goal difference in the opening match fundamentally alters the math of group stage qualification.
You're feeling good.
They are firmly in the driver's seat. The document suggests that if they maintain this level of execution, the dark horse label is entirely insufficient. They have the structural complexity to make a deep run, potentially reaching the quarterfinals or semifinals.
But I keep coming back to the biology of their system. You have to wonder, can a team realistically play this high-octane, high-pressing style every 4 days for a month without their legs falling off? We just spent 20 minutes discussing the immense physiological toll it takes.
This raises an important question, and it is the existential threat hanging over Mexico. The analysis explicitly identifies squad depth and burnout as their primary vulnerabilities.
Right.
The tactical system is pristine, but it is fueled by an unsustainable burn rate of ATP, the energy currency of the cells. When you press with that intensity, your players are spending massive portions of the match in an anaerobic state.
And they can't recover in time.
No, the recovery window between World Cup matches is biologically insufficient to clear the accumulated fatigue and repair the micro tears in the muscle fibers.
Which means the system inevitably degrades. The press arrives a half-second too late. The rotation on the wing is a yard too slow.
Exactly.
And as we established earlier, a press that arrives late isn't just ineffective, it's actively dangerous. It leaves the defense completely exposed.
Precisely. If Mexico tries to play the exact same 11 players for 90 minutes every 4 days, their structural integrity will collapse by the knockout rounds.
So the manager has his work cut out for him.
The manager's most critical job moving forward isn't tactical innovation, it's load management. He has to become a master of rotation, knowing exactly when to pull his most important players off the pitch to save their legs, while somehow maintaining the cohesive mesh of the pressing trap with substitutes. It is a terrifying high-wire act.
They have to surf the edge of their own physical limitations. And what about South Africa? Are we looking at a team that is already psychologically defeated? Or does the source material offer a blueprint for survival?
The trajectory for South Africa is bleak, but not hopeless. The analysis is very clear that they must immediately engage in massive damage control.
Okay, how?
They cannot rely on sweeping tactical changes. They don't have the time or the confidence for that. The primary issue is structural indiscipline.
The defensive naivety we talked about, failing to track runners, turning the ball over cheaply.
That has to be eradicated overnight. But more urgently, the coaching staff has to implement a total psychological reset. The lack of composure that led to the red card is a symptom of a fragile mentality.
Right, you can't carry that baggage.
In tournament football, you cannot afford to let the trauma of a heavy defeat bleed into the next match.
So tactically, what is the recommendation? They clearly can't go toe-to-toe with technically superior teams in open play.
The source material recommends an embrace of pure pragmatism. South Africa must return to the very tactic they were forced to abandon. A hyper-compact low block.
Back to the bunker.
They have to accept that they will not dominate possession. They need to put bodies behind the ball, compress the space in their own penalty area, and focus entirely on frustrating the opponent.
It's survival football.
Yeah.
You are no longer trying to win beautifully. You're trying to steal points in the margins.
Yeah.
You grind out a 0-0 draw, or you hope to score a scrappy goal off a corner kick or a free kick.
Exactly. Maximizing set-piece opportunities is specifically highlighted as their most viable path to points. If they can instill total discipline and execute that pragmatic survival strategy, the document notes they might still have a mathematical chance to fight for second place in the group or advance as one of the best third-place teams.
But the margin for error is absolute zero.
Absolute zero. If they suffer another structural or mental collapse, they will be eliminated in the group stage.
It is a stark contrast in realities. To bring this all together, let's synthesize exactly what we have extracted from this analysis today. Mexico didn't just win on talent. They won through a perfectly executed tactical blueprint,
Middle third pressing?
flank overloads, and ruthless exploitation of space and emotion. And South Africa, conversely, offers a cautionary tale of how quickly a solid game plan can dissolve under sustained pressure and frustration.
It demonstrates that at the highest level of the sport, a single compromised link, whether it's a momentary lapse in tracking a runner or a split-second loss of emotional control, can cascade into total systemic failure.
For you listening, the implications of this analysis reach far beyond a football pitch. The mechanics of dismantling a complex system or protecting one are universal.
Absolutely.
Whether you are analyzing a competitor in the business world, evaluating a geopolitical strategy, or just trying to navigate the friction in your own professional life, the lessons remain the same. It is rarely about who shouts the loudest or who expends the most raw energy.
Yeah, it's about structure.
It is about understanding the geometry of your environment. It is about maintaining absolute discipline when the pressure forces your brain into a state of panic. And perhaps most critically, it is about knowing exactly when to artificially slow the tempo down to let your opponent exhaust themselves, and when to ruthlessly accelerate to exploit the gaps they leave behind.
The underlying mechanisms are what matter. The how and the why will always offer a deeper truth than the what. And as we monitor the rest of this 2026 World Cup, considering everything we've discussed regarding the immense physiological toll of Mexico's high-pressing system, it prompts a compelling thought that builds directly on this analysis.
What's that?
Well, consider how advancements in modern sports science and wearable biometric technology might be the unseen 12th man for a team like Mexico.
Well, that's interesting.
They are essentially tracking the exact degradation of the human battery in real time. If their entire tactical identity relies on avoiding burnout from high-intensity pressing, is the true MVP of this tournament going to be the fitness coaches managing their recovery data behind the scenes?
A fascinating, invisible war happening entirely behind the scenes. Keep that in the front of your mind as this tournament progresses. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you watch a match, don't just follow the ball. Look for the spatial vacuums. Look for the cognitive overload. Look for the trap. Keep questioning the mechanical why behind the headlines. We'll catch you on the next one.